Welcome to Something to Say, where we bring voices from diverse backgrounds who will share their unique stories and perspectives on finding their passion and provide insights on how you can find yours. Join us as host Gregdeshields guides us through this enlightening journey.
Welcome to Something to Say podcast, a unique platform that amplifies the voices of individuals from various backgrounds sharing their passion. I'm your host, Gregdeshields, and I'm pleased to bring you another episode. Thank you for joining us today as we welcome Andrewramer, who also goes by Eli. He is the co-author of the international bestseller Ask Your Angels, a book that has guided spiritual seekers worldwide for over 3 decades. It has sold over 650,000 copies. He is also the author of Angel Answers and Revelations for a New Millennium, as well as several other channeled works that invite readers into a deeper dialogue with the unseen. His newest book is Tales of an Urban Mystic. An award-winning writer, Eli has given voice to both queer and Jewish spiritual traditions through books such as With Flutes Playing, Two Hearts Dancing, fragments of the Brooklyn Talmud. In a recent book, Ever After, he reimagined the lives of 11 iconic Western writers in 10 queer stories. His writings are diverse, from exploring angels and spirituality to inspiration. Ordained by both a rabbi and a pastor as a maggid, he is an interfaith healer and sacred storyteller in the Jewish tradition. He graduated as a religious study major from UC Berkeley, attended the Swedish Institute of Massage, and became a certified body-centered therapist at Hendricks Institute. For the last 4 decades, he has written books, taught meditation, and worked as a freelance writing coach. Andrew received recognition from the Joy Body Award, the Cosmic Shenga Award, and a Leading Voice Award from the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion from the Pacific School of Religion. Born and raised in Elmhurst, New York, across the street from an amusement park called Fairyland, he now lives in Oakland, California, just up the street from another Fairyland. In between, he lived in New York, mostly Brooklyn, for 20 years, then Menlo Park, and now San Francisco. Welcome, Eli. So, Andrew, I am so excited to be able to interview you. I've had an opportunity to read through your bio, and you are an amazing person who has undoubtedly made an impact on the lives of thousands of individuals. And I think the continued work that you produce, I think in the future will just continue to expand it even that much more. As an award-winning writer of the bestseller Ask Your Angels, it inspired me to realize that that book has really served as a spiritual guide for individuals who are trying to make sense of life. And the idea that it sold over 650,000 copies in itself is pretty amazing. So I'd love to talk in detail about all that, and we'll probably engage in that in a number of different ways. So let me just stop here for a moment and say thank you for joining us at Something to Say podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and delighted. And I'm actually the co-author of this book.
Wonderful.
But yes, it has sold a few copies. And I continue to get letters and emails from people saying, thank you. This book changed my life.
Well, we know we want to dive deeper into that, but we also, for the sake of our audience, beyond the introduction I've shared, want to dive deeper and get to know you. So, here on Something to Say podcast, we like to begin with some get to know you questions, a bit of an icebreaker, and then to tell us a little bit more about your story. So, are you up for that?
I am up for it. Has any of your guests ever said no?
No, not really. Well, we had one person, they were only kidding.
Oh, okay. I was slightly kidding too, but go for it.
So my first question to you is, what was your favorite childhood memory?
I actually wrote about that in this book. My favorite childhood memory is that my mother's mother was an amazing story, and she would take reality and turn it into story in a way that set me up to be a storyteller. Although it never occurred to me that that's what I would be, because all I ever did was make art
Mm.
until third grade.
Well, that's such an important connection of how those things that take place to us in our childhood really influences us for the rest of our lives. And often when we ask this question, there is a direct connection to that childhood memory and what most people do as they go forward. And we see with you, that's a direct connection. So thank you for sharing. That's really special. All right, so this one is a little bit different. So, what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, that's a very hard question because I see everything in a kind of yin yang, two-sided way.
Uh,
So I could say not continuing in the PhD program that I was in, I feel like is a failure. On the other hand, it opened up my life to amazing things. I could say that the really thoughtlessly unconscious way that in my senior year of college, I broke up with my girlfriend and came out as gay was a failure, but it led to all of these other wonderful things. So I can't, at this moment, call me in a week and I'll think about it, but I can't think of one single experience in my life that just.
well, so often when we ask that question, and it does turn into a bit of a probing question for the individuals that we interview, and it really is somewhat of it wasn't necessarily about the failure, but it was what they took from that experience and how they applied it to their life as they went further. And to your point, how sometimes that door closed and another great door opened. So I think that's another way of interpreting it. I will also say, though, that I interviewed a Gen Z about their life, and I asked them that question. They said, "Well, I haven't lived long enough to have a day where I've had my biggest failure yet." So we'll hold off on that.
Mm.
So here's another interesting one, and it's probably one of our most popular ones. So if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be and why?
I've been asked this question before. It's incredibly difficult to answer because I want to invite, as a writer, Emily Dickinson. I want to invite Franz Kafka. I want to invite Leo Tolstoy. I want to invite whoever edited the Hebrew Bible. I think it would be interesting to have dinner with Alexander the Great, and I could go on and on. So it's not like I have one very clear person.
Mm.
But if you said, I am sorry, but I have the technology, we've just evolved it to bring back anyone, but we only have one person, I'd probably go with Emily Dickinson.
Well, well, and it's a very odd question to serve as a follow-up, but, what do you think you'd have to have for dinner?
Oh, well, I would cook and I would probably make something that would seem really weird to her. I think it could be a stew made out of brown rice and lentils with ginger chopped up, carrots, collard greens, kale. I'd make some kind of salad, and I think that would be it. And
Wow,
then over the course of dinner, I would that over the last 10 years or so, I've been writing music for some of her poems, and I would like to sing them to her.
wow, very nice. That's why it's such an interesting question, not only just the idea of having dinner, but, later as you kinda dive into, like, what would that conversation be like? Alright, so let's get a little bit more insight about your story. So, how big is your inner circle?
Ah, that's an interesting question. again and again and again, people tell me, you have more friends than anyone I have ever met. I remember my 50th birthday party, my brother came to visit, and there were people that I knew from early childhood, every decade of my life. And he was in awe. And I'd never noticed that. I just thought that was my life.
Mm.
And one of the blessings of my life is that I continue to make new friends all the time. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was interviewed by someone who was doing his PhD on queer elders.
Mm.
And someone else connected me to him, and we sat for about 3 hours, and asked me questions. He said almost nothing. But when he asked me the question, what are the ages of, I said, I'm old. Most of my older friends have died, but I have friends of every generation. And that was the one time that he responded, and he said, that's interesting. You're the 40th person I've interviewed, and almost no one said. Every single other person has said, all of my friends are around my age.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We've asked that question and we've gotten some perspective around the inner circle that as you get older, it gets smaller. Some of that has just had to do with the fact of those who over your life you have developed relationships that you really feel are individuals that are trusted to you. Actually, someone shared with us that they don't necessarily consider it their inner circle. They call it more of like their front row to their life. Like who are the people that I would want to have that VIP seat up front to look at the performance of my life and to be able to evaluate it. But I think the real significance of it is how that particular audience are the ones who really inspire you and give you clarity in however you move through life. So I appreciate you sharing your insights around that. So
Thank you. You interview endless numbers of people of every age. I'm curious, what's your inner circle?
So my inner circle has gotten really small. You know, I had a very high profile job before, and I was amongst those people who unfortunately had confusion as to who were really your friends or those who just wanted to be your friend. And to that degree, I've gotten clarity over the last few years, and my inner circle is purposefully very small. So maybe 5 to 7 people. Where in the past I felt, oh, I could pick up the phone and I would call this person, or call that person.
Mhm.
Now I'm very intentional about who I would call and why I would even call. So, but I will say that there's clarity in having a smaller inner circle because the kind of conversations you have are more consistent as opposed to sporadic, because it maybe was so big before. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll find a new stream of friends, but I'm very happy with the small circle I have today.
Good. I'm glad. I actually have one good friend who lives nearby who is 4.
Oh, wow.
And I have another friend we just did a Zoom visit with her mom the other day, and she's going to start kindergarten.
Wow.
Amazing conversation. So I feel blessed.
Wow. All right. So who's had the most influence in your life?
Well, that's a difficult question. I'll answer it in 2 different ways, Greg.
Okay.
Um, God, and I had a professor in college. Her name was Irene E. She survived the Holocaust. I may cry. She survived the Holocaust because neighbors hid her in their chicken coop for 3 years.
Wow.
Almost all of her friends and family died. It turned out a year later that I think it was the American Red Cross connected her with her mother and sister who had survived. I don't know if you ever saw the film Schindler's List,
Mhm, mhm.
but it turns out that her mother and sister actually worked in Schindler's factory. And
Wow.
that's how basic. She came to this country and ended up getting a PhD in Chinese culture and language. And being the uh, quirky character that I am, I did my junior year abroad at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Of course, I took a class.
Mhm.
Other people go there, they're not going to take a class in Chinese art and culture. But we connected from the very first day of class. And she said something which is in this book that I won't do the giveaway of someone wants to read Tales of an Urban Mystic, but she changed my life in one sentence.
Wow.
And that was my junior year. So, a few years ago.
Wow.
But she died a few years ago. We continued to be in touch. We never saw each other again. We would talk on the phone and exchange letters and eventually email. But she was an amazing scholar, extraordinary being, wrote a number of incredible books herself. So if someone's interested in the interplay of sort of Chinese and Jewish culture, look up Irene Eber, Eber.
Wow. Well, I thank you so much for honoring her and sharing that information and certainly recommending people to look up her writings. I think it's also important that when we ask that question, how this ability to connect with another person or just to make that connection has such a strong power in driving you in the way that you navigate your life. And, you know, sometimes it's a very traditional path of who might influence you, and then others, it's not. So, but I do thank you for sharing that. All right, so our last question, and then I really want to dive into a lot of the things that you're best known for. But when was the best year of your life, and when was the worst year of your life?
I think I'll start with worst first,
Okay.
because I'm not sure about the best. The part of me wants to say next year will be the best year of my life. But I think in many ways, the worst year of my life was the year that my father left home. I was little. I did not expect it. And it was devastating. And I felt, in a way, as if I had been murdered because he told me with no preparation at all.
Mm.
Every night after he tucked my brother in, my mother would be dinner dishes downstairs, and he and I would often wrestle and play on their bed, and tickle each other. And we were doing that, and we stopped, and we were kind of sitting with our legs hanging over the side of the bed and our, propped up on our elbows or hands. I can't remember, but kind of propped up and no prep. He just turns to me and says, "I'm not coming home anymore."
Wow.
Just like that. And I felt stabbed in the heart. And my brother and I talk about it to this day, what that was like, what he was, what our lives would have been like if that hadn't happened. If
Mm.
he and my mother had found a way, or he himself had found a way to navigate his own complexity, but he didn't.
Wow. So he clearly, for you, was such an influence, and how that aspect of him leaving just changed the trajectory, I guess, of, what life would be. However, perhaps making you just an incredibly stronger person to face what is before you as you go forward. So,
Yeah. Well, that's the yin yang of the awful thing
yeah.
leads to good things. And we went on a good number of years later to become very close and more show off and tell in the States. So 2 years ago,
Mhm,
this book was published,
mhm.
The Dream Gardener, and it's a kid's story that I wrote in the '70s that my father did the art for.
Oh, wow. Really?
And he died not very long after that,
Mm.
and I stuck it all away and forgot about it for, I don't know, 40 years, a long time.
Wow.
And now it's out in the world.
Wow. What a great gift.
It's magic. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, on the other side, that best year of your life?
In some ways, every single year of my life is the best year. I, looking at this year, at kind of halfway, all kinds of things I find devastating. The situation in the world, politics, the increase of the dangers of climate. And I've never been happy.
Yeah. Well, so often as I think of how I would respond to that question, I too look at, I think every year is the best year. I mean, number one, that you're able to be there and that you're able to experience all that it has. And throughout the course of the day, they're probably some of the most exciting, some of the most high point things. We have in our house, we ask the question like, what's your mental percentage? And I've consistently hovered around like 98%. So I guess in general, everything's
Great.
pretty good. So, Andrew, we've talked a lot to get to know you, and I really thank you for that in-depth understanding of you. But I really want to spend some time and talk about the things that you write about and that you really have influenced individuals. So, I want to start with something that can connect with those of us in the audience. So, I'd like you to tell us how we can find and appreciate the sacred in everyday life.
I imagine that a number of people won't like my answer, but what I would say is when you're out in the world, never listen to me. I apologize in advance. Never listen to a podcast. In fact, if you have to use your phone, sit down. Notice the world around you at every moment. What I tell my students is one of the very core practices I taught 40, 50 years ago is every single day when you wake up and before you go to sleep, lovingly massage your body so that you're present. Because this world is so focused on our heads,
Mm.
on objects. I mean, I walk on the street and it amazes me. Everyone is looking in their device or riding by on a bicycle, blasting music, but not present. So those are my two suggestions. Lovingly touch yourself. Notice where you don't want to touch yourself. Notice where you don't want to stop.
Mm.
Notice the judgments you carry. Feel your breath and go out in the world and notice every tree, every plant, every flower, and particularly notice every baby and every kid.
Wow.
And every person that you see, inwardly or actually, bow to them. I mean, even the people that you hate, we're one family. And if we're going to survive, this to me is fundamental that we acknowledge that every single person that we pass is a relative. You know, we're all the descendants, all 8 billion plus of us, of a family that started out in Africa. We're all
Well, there's so much I take from your words in that, over the past few years, one of the statement that I've heard often is to go out for a walk and just look up. And it's amazing what you see when you look up, especially when there are no leaves on the trees. And on a relatively clear day to see the way that the limbs of the trees really connect with the sky. And, if you had asked me about that 4 or 5 years ago, I just probably wouldn't have really been clear enough in my mind to be able to do that. But you're absolutely right. I think that ability to kind of shut things off and to be present in yourself can provide you to have a better sense of who you are in this world and how you navigate it. And I do appreciate that fact, how we're all interconnected. I recently heard a gentleman say, what is the difference between me as an accomplished business person and the person who's sitting there on the top of a heater on the street begging for money? Like, when you look at the parallels of our lives, when did it change? And that's where I think, as you point out, like, we're all human. So absolutely. All right, so I wanted to do a follow-up. So another question is, how can we awaken something when within each of us unite humanity? And in today's world, I'm so anxious to ask you this question because I think it's so important for people to hear from individuals like yourself to help give us a sense of clarity.
well, I love that that is your question, Greg. And again, in Delve and Urban Mist, chapter 39, it's called An Amazing Vision. And it's literally a step by step practice for doing what you ask. So I don't know if you know about chakra. Some people say chakra, but
Mm.
they're energy centers in the body. They're taught in different cultures. Mostly they're grounded in Hindu practices and teaching. But what I was taught many, 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 many years ago is that there are 7 main chakras. I would, which other people know. Crown chakra, third eye, throat chakra, heart chakra. Going down, there are 7 main. What I was taught is that an eighth one is evolved called the thymus chakra. It's in the middle of our chest between our heart and our throat. And when it is awake in our bodies, we are energetically connected to every single other person who has awakened their thymus.
Hmm.
So I was taught this back in the I didn't know at first that it was real or not, but I read a book by someone who is no longer with us, who is an amazing healer, Brew Joy. His last name was Joy, and he wrote a book called Joy's Way. And he talked about what he called the high heart chakra. And when my very first book, which is long out of print, which I also did the illustrations for,
Uh-huh.
when it was published, I was on a television show, interviewed with Brew Joy. Like, oh my God, you changed my life. My father studied with him when he was dying. And we had an incredible conversation about what he calls the high heart, and I call the soul. So if listeners, watchers get a copy and go to that chapter, there's very specific about it. But what amazes me is that when I first started learning about it and teaching it, I never met anyone who had an awakening. And what I was taught when I was given the information is that after human being exploded the first nuclear device, that our ancestors and our guides in heaven said that was a terrible mistake.
Mm.
They're going to destroy the world. What can we do to connect people? And they talked about it, debated it, and someone said, let's invent a new chakra that will connect people. They did it. They implanted They implanted it in us. But here's the thing I noticed, and this is almost the end of my incredibly long answer. Almost all the time now, I'm walking down the street. Someone's pushing their baby in a stroller. Their thymus chakra. Oh, uh, so something miraculously marvelous is happening about connection. So anyone who's listening, think about it. Is the connection actually from our body, from the place between where we communicate and our heart and our capacity? Um, Whether you get the book or not, think about awakening something. Tune in there. And when you're out, standing in line in a store, at a red light, stop and think, ooh, I can take in and broadcast this energy, and we can connect an energetic web that will connect every single person on the planet in a way we've never been.
Well, I thank you for sharing that because I think as people are trying to look at ways of being more united in humanity and realizing with all the production and commercial noise that is affecting us, how can we look inside of ourselves to be able to have a better and a more authentic connection? Because that person I engaged in the grocery store, that person that I'm standing next to at the red light, there's a reason why I'm standing next to them. There's a billion some people out there, and this is a person I'm standing next to. So I appreciate you sharing that because I think as we all are trying to find a way to get centered and be more focused around what is humanity and how do we unite, I think we look for all perspectives that can help us along. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So here's one that as I, reviewed the questions, I was anxious to get your thoughts. We've already kind of talked about it in terms of if you were able to have dinner with any historical figure, but more importantly, from your perspective, how have you communicated with people who have died?
When I was in fifth grade, the grandmother who was such an amazing storyteller died. I was devastated. It was after my father left, and she was one of the people that held my life together. There were not a lot of them. My mother couldn't do that. Most of our family. I mentioned to you earlier that growing up, one of my best friends was named Greg. His mother helped, but I was destroyed. And the rabbi of our synagogue told me something that I've now heard from people all over the world, which is sit down, write your grandmother a letter, take it in the backyard and burn it. And I did. And it opened the door for connect. And whenever I missed, I would write a letter. Sometimes now when people die, I will send them an email. I'll write the whole email and I will send it to Katerina@evan.com. Of course, there's no such thing. It's not going to go, but I feel like I sent it out energetic.
Mhm.
But twice in my life, and these are stories I told in the book, that grandmother physically 2 weeks after she died showed up to see me. And after the year after I graduated from college, my father's father showed up to see me. So what I often say to students and talk about in the classes I teach and the things that I write is that our ancestors, our God, angels, goddesses, God, the creator, are talking to us all. Some of us are more genetically programmed to hear than others. So I often say, I'm vision impaired. I can't draw.
Mm.
I can't shoot a basket. There are things I'm really bad at. I can't balance my check. I have to count on my fingers, but I'm genetically to talk to dead. But they're talking to us all the time. That makes sense for you.
Mm.
Some people are better at listening, but if everyone gets quiet, and my hope for the future is that everyone will become more and more and more and more. That no one will play music in their cars or out in the street. I love music. I sing in my head all day,
Mm.
but it's getting in the way of our.
Oh.
Then you sit really quietly and open up because you really miss your grandpa.
Mm.
You miss your best friend who died from suicide. You miss the neighbor down the street who used to babysit for you. There's energetic connection. I hope that's helpful.
It is, and I have to tell you, it was interesting when, I wrote the question, I wanted to ask you, and after listening to your responses, I remember when my mother passed away, and honestly, I mean, of course, it was devastating. You go through some of the most difficult emotions in your life. But, like, 5 days later, and I've shared this story with other people, I don't know how many people can appreciate it, but 5 days later, I distinctly remember seeing her at a gate, waving her hands at me, and it was such an empowering image. And when I read this question and I was thinking to myself, I still harness the clarity of that as if I dreamed about it or I saw it last night. And I always have felt like her energy was very much connected to me, but it was almost like that was the approval to move forward. And it wasn't just in a sound, but it was this whole visual connection. So, I don't know what others might express or think of that, but when I read the question, I was curious to hear your response, and what you shared is very much connected to me personally. So I thank you for that.
I think everyone, here now, thanks you for sharing it because it's more common than most people will admit.
Right.
And then there are other ways. This is a pattern that happens in cultures and places all over the planet that you may know about and other people know about, which is often the dead will communicate
Mm.
through birth. So I've heard this story again. Your partner died. And suddenly you've lived in the same house for 5 years. There's a bird feeder right outside your bedroom window. Suddenly a kind of bird that's never, ever come before comes every day and is on the bird feeder staring at you. And I've heard so many stories. I was very close to my mother's sister who was very, very slowly dying.
Right.
I was in college. I was walking home from school one day and a giant flock of birds landed on the hill in front of me. And I knew and I started crying. Oh, Aunt Myra died. I walked up the hill. As I entered my dorm, My room was right across the front door. I could hear my phone ringing, and I ran in and picked it up. And my mother is on the phone saying, "Yeah, Myra."
Well,
And I said to her, "I know." And I told her about the birds.
well,
So I've heard these stories from Africa, India, from cultures all over the planet. So, but we're not taught that. So the bird may be landing outside because, your dad died 2 weeks ago. You ain't thinking, "Oh, that's Papa trying to talk to me."
wow. Well, thank you for sharing that insight and the ability to put it in a perspective that our audience can apply it to their own experiences and maybe see a greater value to something that probably in their mind initially was just a small thing, but probably meant a whole lot more. All right, so you've lived in some amazing places. So as I, read through this question, I really wanted to hear your thoughts. So what does it mean to live as a mystic in a kaleidoscope of everyday urban life? And urban life today is an experience. So what are your thoughts?
I think often people think of mystics as living very far away in a retreat center, in a convent, in a monastery, separate from the world. But to live in an urban space is what I was sent to do. Or chose. I'm not the only one. I meet people all the time, endlessly the world. I'm just sitting on the grass. I live in Oak by Lake Merritt, and someone comes up and starts talking to me, and we become good friends. Also, a mystic. So actually, I call the memoir Tales of an Urban Mystic, but its original title was Mystic or Mistake,
Ah,
because I spent much of my life thinking in this culture, oh, you're crazy.
mm,
But again and again, I found out that I'm not. And again, what I notice in urban settings, and I don't know what it's like where you live, where other people live, there are more homeless people in the street
mm,
ever seen in my entire life. And many of them are talking to people who are not there, to beings who are not there. And I recognize that they're my family and that I was blessed by connection, focus, clarification, blessed again by Irie Eber giving me information that changed my life. And I see these people coming by who in our culture are crazy.
mm.
And it breaks my heart because I know that there are shamans, they're healers, they're prophets, they're elders who didn't get the training.
Well, that's a very clear way to kind of understand how navigating that urban life that if you look at and pay attention to, there's more to it than what you just think, as you walk by.
Yeah.
All right. So one last question, and then we'll move to our final question that we love to ask at something to say. But how do you harness different gifts that people don't fully understand? And I should preface by saying we've talked about a lot that there are probably gifts that people have that they just don't understand. And like, how would you help them to be able to harness that in a way that they're able to put them into action?
Well, your words are making me smile because I'm thinking of harness as something that's attached to a horse. So what I'm suggesting, I never went in this direction before, but what I would say is to someone who's listening, you see things other people see. You hear things other people hear. You're like me, you remember multiple past lives, but you don't have a context. Think about all these things as a horse. It's not strange, it's not weird, it's a horse. Maybe you've never been on it, and probably haven't been on a horse in 50 years. But think of it as something 4 legs, way more connected to the earth than we are with our 2. And find the harness, find the way to connect so that you're not sick, so that you're not judging it and thinking, "Am I crazy?" But no, you're not in a culture that didn't train you to be what?
Well, I thank you for that. I think in our culture today, that ability for us individually to be able to put pieces together beyond how we're told to do that really helps us become a much more successful contributor to society. All right, so we've reached the end of our interview, but at the end of all of our Something to Say podcast interviews, we like to just simply rely on the name of our podcast. So it's entitled Something to Say. So we'd like to know, what do you have to say?
Well, at the end of this long conversation, probably we've answered that question. And I think as an author, as a mystic, I would wrap up by saying, if you're interested in a focus, a grounding, and a connection, my father took this picture of me. My grandson took that picture of me. The background is what I am looking at in Oakland. And a very dear friend spliced it all together, which I can't do. If you're interested, I utterly love supporting neighborhood books. If you have one, walk in and say, hey, I'd like to order a copy of Tales of an Urban Mist. If you are in a place where you don't have one, it's sold in all kinds of places. But if you go to the publisher, which is WIPF, WIPFAND, and stop, STOCK, and look up the book and scroll down, if you sign up for their mailing list, you can actually get a 40% discount. So, given that was my invitation to be here to
Absolutely.
sell the book, and I'm actually wearing
The same shirt.
deliberately what I wore in the same cap that day.
And the same cap.
So, Greg, thank you for the questions, the conversations, your expansive focus and clarity. And I'm just so grateful for this time. So thank you very, very much. And blessings to everyone who's hearing our word.
Well, Andrew, I want to extend my personal thank you for sharing your passion and your insights. Your words truly are informative, and I'm sure will inspire many of those who are in our audience. So it has been an absolute pleasure having you on our show today. And to our audience, that's a wrap for this episode of Something to Say. And I encourage you to stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds sharing their passion. So until next time, this is Gregdeshields signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Something to Say. We trust you found some valuable insights and takeaways that can help you find your passion. Don't miss out on future episodes. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred platform. We value your feedback and suggestions, so let us know how we can serve you better. Keep the conversation going and stay inspired until we meet again. Take care and happy listening.